Good day, everyone. Today, I will going to discuss about the categorical imperative, the universalizability principle, and the principle of humanity respect for persons. But first, I am going to discuss the categorical imperative. According to Kant, anytime we do a certain act voluntarily, we operate under some kind of maxim, rule, or directive. Maxim is one which is the guiding reason or principle for acting under a particular situation. Ang maxim ay isang personal na prinsipyo kung saan tayo kumikilos bilang salungat sa isang layunin at panlabas na prinsipyo o tuntunin kung saan tayo dapat kumilos. Implicit maxims are most likely to come only to people's attention and to be made explicit when they are asked to justify their action to themselves. The whole point here is this, ang maxim ay bahagi ng ating pang-araw-araw na pang-uugali, alaman natin ang mga ito o hindi. Kant introduces the concept of universalization, which holds that we must be universalize our moral judgment. It states that we must apply the judgments we make to everyone without exception. Example, a television commercial or a video games. Sensational media companies produce films viewed around the world. This means that a lot people experience the same culture. This creates a universalization of popular culture. Kant categorical imperative expressed in a number of different ways. But the most popular formulation is act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. The main point here is the very motive of action. According to this particular formulation, the essence of morality lies in acting on the basis of an impersonal principle that is valid for every person, including the self. A categorical imperative, instead of taking an if then form, is an absolute command such as do a or you ought to do. Example, you shouldn't kill. You ought to help those in need or don't steal. It doesn't matter what your wants or goals are. You should follow a categorical imperative no matter what. Maxims that cannot be universalized or applied to all without exception and a consistent basis are immoral. Example, the case of making a false promise. Kant's own example. When we do a promise, one intends to fulfill it. Promises are meant to be fulfilled, not broken, as many love to say, for them to be meaningful and truly sensible. But if a person makes the promise does not intend to fulfill it, then we can say that promise is false, not a true promise. Now, let us try for the sake of argument to accept as a maxim that says, I'm making a promise without intending to fulfill it. Let us see whether this can stand the test of the universalizability principle. Here, one has to ask whether this can be made into a universal law, a law that requires everyone to break his promise. To do this, we have to imagine a scenario where everyone will have as their maxim making promises without fulfilling them. Imagine everybody does this since there is a universal law that exactly commands this to done. What happens then? Logically and expectedly, if everybody breaks their promises, naturally, no one will believe in promises anymore. And since no one believes in promises anymore, no one make any promises. As the very familiar golden rule says, do unto others what would you like others do unto you. Or putting it negatively, do not do unto others what you don't want others do unto you. In concrete terms, to find out for yourself whether what you intend to do is right or wrong, good or bad, moral or immoral, is to ask, what if everyone else would do the same? The whole point thus is this. Don't do things that everyone did them would make for a world you yourself find unacceptable or abominable and repugnant. For example, if you want people to be polite to you, then you should be polite to them. Positive form. If you don't want people to be rude to you, then you shouldn't be rude to them. Kantian commentators claim that the categorical imperative is essentially a sort of a test of which actions are said to be permissible or justifiable. In applying the universality test to specific situations, if a particular act fails this test, then it is said to be wrong or immoral, hence not permissible or morally forbidden. It is then wrong or immoral to behave in ways that you could not reasonably and honestly be willing to have everyone else act. Don't make yourself or anyone else, no matter who he or she and whatever may be her conditions or situations, are an exception. The categorical imperative holds true to for everyone in this world and even outside of it. This is morality supreme and ultimate principle. Next is the principle of humanity, respect for persons. The other specific and famous Kantian formulation of the categorical imperative concerns respect for the dignity of persons, oftentimes referred to as simply the principle of ends or sometimes called as the principle of humanity. For Kant, every human being has a supreme worth and profound dignity due to the fact that he is a rational agent. This means that because of the ability to think, one is able to decide what particular goals to pursue and generally what one wants to do with his life. One's essential dignity, therefore, mainly lies in the person's capacity to determine his own destiny or end as a self directed and conscious being. Kant asked if there were a categorical imperative, what would its end be? Who does it serve? Since every action has an end and since the categorical imperative is blending on everyone, its end must be given by reason alone and so equally valid for all rational beings. Hence, as a self conscious and self determining creature, the person as an end can never be subjected to any form of manipulation and exploitation as if he is just any other object that can be used to serve some other ends rather than as an end in himself. What is this end that the categorical imperative serves? The answer for Kant is that all rational beings exist as ends in themselves. As ends in themselves, human beings have value that's absolute and unconditional. Thus, human persons are the ends or the goals by which the categorical imperative serves. The second formulation goes, so act as a treat humanity whether in your own person or that any others always as an end and never as a means only. Kant's own argument in support of this principle goes, in valuing anything, I endue it with value. It can have no value apart from someone's valuing it. As a valued object, it has conditional worth which is derived from valuation. On the other hand, the person who values the object is the ultimate source of the object and as such belongs to a different spheres of beings. We as valuers must conceive ourselves as having unconditioned worth. We cannot think of our personhood as mere thing, for when we would have to judge it to be without any value except that is given to it by the source of value. And there is no reason to suppose that one person should have unconditional worth and not another who is relevantly similar. Therefore, we are not mere objects. We have unconditional worth and so must treat all such value gives as valuable in themselves as and not merely means, as quoted in Cushman 2005. This means that as a persons with absolute and unconditional dignity and value, everyone should be treated with utmost respect. Persons are not instruments or tools that are to be used to further one's interest. We cannot use people to achieve our own goals and happiness. As we have just said, by virtue or their rationality, people can decide for themselves. They can direct their own actions and thus determine their own destiny. Here, people's worth is something intrinsic. They are valuable in themselves and deserves our esteem and respect. Unlike things or objects that only have conditional value and worth, since they only have a value because people endowed them with such, and if people stop desiring them, they will be worthless. People then are the source of all conditional value. For example, in riding a jeepney to school, are we not using the driver to serve our end to reach our destination? Or even on the part of the driver, is he not using us only as a means to get what he wants money from us? This means that we should treat others as an end and never as a means only. We must not act rudely to other people. An important point to bear in mind of this second formulation of Kant of the categorical imperative is that he explicitly insists we should also treat our own very selves with respect, just like the way we treat others. Obviously, Kant teaches us that we all have the moral obligation to ourselves and not just to others. It is for this reason that Kant himself strongly considers killing oneself suicide as wrong and thus morally impermissible. If, according to Kant, I opt to terminate my life for me to end my problems and pains, I am then treating myself as worldly or immoral, though I were simply a thing to be used to achieve an end, that of revealing myself from pain and suffering of this life. This is also very much true to those who allow themselves to be manipulated physically or mentally in order to get something. In Lecture on Ethics, Kant mentions and discusses a number of duties that we owe to ourselves as persons. He enumerates duties to self, such as proper self respect, self mastery, duties concerning our bodies, as well as duties regarding the way we ought to be seen in work and in play. Here Kant show that morality does not only concern other but also ourselves. The personal dimension of morality is oftentimes forgotten in other ethical theories, such as in utilitarianism, that give emphasis only on the social aspect. In Kant, as we have just mentioned, morality covers both the personal as well as the social domains of human existence. That would be all. Thank you for listening. God bless.